But that's the tech for this week. However, we also did go see a movie, and so we'll just talk about the movie that we went to see. A bit controversial of a movie, but I thought it was amazing, and that is the Joker movie.
Yeah, I really haven't read or heard what was going on in the internets except through this guy, and what Victor told me was that there were some people who were even saying that the Joker just should not be allowed for consumption, which is censorship and inherently has a lot of problems. Censorship is really not the answer. And then after having seen it, I can only just kind of tip my head at those people and wonder what they were thinking. It is a
But
masterpiece.
yeah, so we'll start off with no spoilers, and then we'll make a clear cut of when we get into spoilers, so that if you're not interested. I really like the movie. It's we both would consider it a masterpiece of a
Right.
movie. Very good. Very dark. Definitely don't go bringing kids to it. I know it's the Joker, who is traditionally a Batman and a kids cartoon and things like that,
Yeah.
but this is a dark movie.
There's violence.
Yeah.
Shooting, blood.
So it's not a kids movie at all.
Please don't bring your children.
But if you are up for that, if you're up for this dark, twisted movie, and some people might even think of it as a little bit kind of a pretentious-ish movie, just like the way the cinematicness of it,
Because of the art style, you mean?
Yeah, the art style. And
Oh, because are you referencing how some people think certain movies are cinema and other movies shouldn't be cinema?
I wasn't actually referencing that, but yeah, essentially
The artistic style.
it's a very artistic movie, and some people just aren't for that. Some people want it, and so I just thought I'd let you know. So I think it's great. If you are interested at the slightest bit of it, go see it for yourself.
Well, and it's not even, I wouldn't even restrict it to saying like comic book fans. It does also have a very heavy societal, political sort of message. I'd say even more than undertones. I mean, the whole story is very much based in, it's a fictional city, but
Yeah, there's
you can see parallels for sure.
Yeah, the director had, and we'll go into that a little bit more with the spoilers, but there's definitely a message that it's trying to send, and but that's our review for now. I hope
Spoiler-free
the
one.
spoiler-free one.
But now
see
really
it.
diving in, and now spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert! Warning!
Stop
Diving
it.
into the Joker movie. We're gonna go over theories. We're gonna go over.
Oh, we are. Okay. I've got a lot to
Um,
say on this too.
We're going to be going over the political message. She's going to go over her political message mostly. I essentially agree with how she's interpreting it, the political message. But I'll mostly talk about the more lighthearted,
So let's just get into it?
yeah. Let's get it.
Okay. I wonder if those people that were saying that this shouldn't be allowed to exist, that it shouldn't be around for consumption, that it would breed violence, I wonder if what they're saying is it's not unbelievable. Because that's the fact of what this story was. It was very much a portrayal that as you're watching it, everything is like, yeah, that stuff happens. This is very realistic. It's not very cartoonish or comic booky. It's not, I mean, it's not false physics. It's not in any way cartoony, and it's kind of heartbreaking because this guy. Okay, I've taken some notes because I have a lot of thoughts on this, but the portrayal was well done. The writing, the acting, the directing, it was, as I said, a masterpiece. Just the artistic styling, the coloring, just every detail that was done. The only thing or the biggest thing that was unrealistic to me, I guess there were two things. Someone else pointed out that like there's a point where they record a stand-up comedy set and video cameras really weren't accessible at that time. But what I thought was the most unrealistic was when the Joker puts his fingers into the rich white kid's mouth and the rich white kid just stands there, especially since the Joker was on the opposite side of a fence and the kid could have literally just leaned back, stepped back, anything that way. Besides that, this story was very much a realistic portrayal of things that people go through, and it definitely had a theme of irony. There was like this discordant tension throughout it, and it was literally a clown who wasn't funny or really happy, and as much as we hope for good and positive things to happen, this movie really focused on the poor choices by a lot of people, not just the main character Arthur Fleck, who becomes Joker. This is his origin story, how he goes from being Arthur to Joker. But his poor choices rather, were really just reactionary. He wasn't this insane guy going around doing violence for no reason. It was all reactionary. Just right from the beginning, he was really, it seemed like, trying. He had some good coping mechanisms that you can see him try to employ. He does fidget his legs. He would smoke, which isn't necessarily a healthy habit, but he had his coping mechanisms. He even tried to express himself verbally and articulate what he thought. And really, I thought he was a very articulate character, especially considering the traumatic history, and that they do in the end ultimately have that turn where he becomes the Joker, who is historically and widely acknowledged as a psychopath, an insane person. But all through this movie, his poor choices were really reactionary. It was all the people around him, especially people who might be assumed to come from or be in places of privilege. Those people were consistently the worst to him. And I think that maybe is what makes it kind of scary to some people and makes them have that reaction of like, oh, we should censor this. Violence, breeding violence, is a whole other thing. There are definitely much worse, much more gruesome examples that we could point to, and that I would argue are much, much, much harsher for a lot of audiences and should be perhaps not restricted, not censored, but people should probably choose to limit certain types of violence consumption, in my opinion. But given the gravity and the harsh realities herein, it is important that the director, I think, put this in the past and in that fictional city of Gotham, even though it kind of parallels New York very closely. It's not saying like, oh, this is what we should do in the future. It was in the past. It was in a fictional city. And that separation from reality, I think, also further separates it in people's minds, whether consciously or subconsciously, given the reality of how realistic and kind of believable all the situations in this movie were. Let's see. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I am kind of eating up the time right now. But I have a lot to say on this because it was a good movie, and it was, yeah. So let's see. So he painted it with vivid depiction, and it was a tragedy in which the antagonist, he experiences a shift toward comedy. His personal experience is that he goes from not even being sure he exists because people aren't acknowledging him, that he feels like he's just running and getting nowhere, that he's just every day doing the same things, checking the mailbox and it's always empty, always walking that long, trudging that long walk up that really high flight of stairs through the same things. He's trying so hard, and yet the overall story is a tragedy for the city. But we know that Joker is a villain of our beloved hero saga, Batman. And Yeah, I think it was interesting that that people do have that reaction that people should not consume this movie. I thought it was a very good political message as well, sort of around that line of like, you don't know what someone else is going through, and it's impossible to know what they have been through, what they are going through. And in this main character, he was accepting help, the help that was available, such as in our reality, but money speaks, money trumps true need. And in the movie, when the Department of Health, the social worker, ended his services, that was just another detrimental. I mean, he wasn't getting his medication. He wasn't getting the minimal supports that he had been getting. And the reality is that that kind of thing does happen. Yeah. I think problems in societies, problems that really exist in our society, plagued this antagonist, and those are ultimately what led him to violence. Back to him feeling unseen and unheard. Again, it's just that, like, if you can lend a listening ear, try to. And if you don't have something nice to say or something helpful, maybe don't say it. There were, I mean, he tried to tell the social worker that he didn't think she was listening. He outright states that he wasn't even sure if he existed. And then what finally gave him some attention, something to feel that warmth of life, was killing those bullies on the train. And again, that was very reactionary. Those guys were bullying a woman, and he wasn't even trying to intervene, but because of his condition, he starts laughing, and then they bully him and start to physically abuse him. He has the gun that someone else had given to him, which is a whole other thing about guns in our society and their availability when we're not going to support people and their health needs, their mental health needs. And if we are a society where we're going to allow people to be oppressed because of a lack of money and it's startling and staggering that it's really not an unbelievable story. I think that the wording that was used in the movie, someone asked him like, "What's wrong with you?" And like another woman was like, "Stop bothering my kid." They're always putting the blame on him too, which is something that often does happen in our society a lot. A lot of people, I think, we forget to use those "I feel" statements, or say like, I would rather if you didn't talk to my kid right now. But just that harsh interaction and putting the blame on someone else. You don't know what they're going through. Just maybe try not to be so harsh would be a bottom line I would take away from this movie. You're peeking at my notes like there's more. I'm sorry. And so then in the movie, society and individuals in it, they continue to treat him with disdain. And the only flicker of kindness from the woman in his building that she lived in the same one with him, it started that delusion for him. And he was aching. He was so starved for humanity, warmth, kindness. And so many people in our society forget that, we really don't know what's going on in someone else. And so even just that tiny sliver of kindness that she showed him in the elevator, yeah, it could be considered very creepy that he then he stalked her one day and he was having these delusional fantasies around them having a relationship. But ultimately, if more people were nice, at least neutral to him, he might not have become Joker. And then you do also have the blatant acts against him. Kids taking from him, physically abusing him, and then the stakes raised to adults, bullying him in the subway, they were harassing the woman, but then they physically abuse him. He endured quite a lot before he really snapped. And then his mother, the one person who loved him, she even lied to him. Perhaps not intentionally, she had her own problems, but she gave him this misinformation that led to further strife, physical altercation with the man that he presumed his father at that time. And even though his mother, was delusional in her support of Tom Wayne, and she perpetuated this idolization of this rich man when they're living in poverty. I mean, I don't know what my notes say here. Oh, and then it turns out that like the mother that was this person that he loved, she sat idly by, whatever. She let her boyfriends abuse Arthur when he was little, and that's part of why he is now the way he is neurologically, and that he in spite of all of that abuse, he did grow up to be a functional person. Yeah, he still lived with his mom, but it wasn't that she was supporting him. He was taking care of her. Very much so. And you know, in the end, the movie did meander to the coming of Joker, a persona that was given to Arthur by the man that he had favored and dreamt of meeting. Yet, when honest Arthur made it there to the stage, it was because of being made fun of by that same idol. And again, this speaks to, in our society, there are, I think, are sometimes when jokes do cross lines that they can be offensive, but at the same time, there's this culture of like wokeness and like, oh, let's call other people out and like make them, like shame them for having crossed what my line was. But the reality is there are different interpretations, and it's also really hard to know what other people are meaning in jokes. And so in those instances, yeah, it did seem very much like the late night host was making fun of him, and he had no way to know what Arthur was going through. It seems harsh that he just was making fun of a random person, but that kind of thing really does happen too. And I don't know if there is a right answer around that. We can all just try our best. I am getting to the end of my review. Thank you for waiting so patiently. I hope it's not been a total boring monologue, but and so another thing that I thought was really interesting was, again and again during the movie, he pointed real guns, finger guns, at his own head, seeming to portray his inner discontent in this idea of, should I kill myself? And even in his journal, there's this line, I hope my death has more meaning than my life. And back to the artistic part, one of the most artistic shots of the movie to me, which it's hard to say because all of it was so artistic, but it's coming from kind of like the Joker's leaning back in a chair and the camera comes from behind over the top of his head, and then you get to where you see his face, and as it gets to the part of his face where you see his mouth, he's got a gun in his own mouth again. And it's like, goodness, this poor guy, like he's really struggling here. And that guy that he'd worked with, I mean, gave him a gun, just literally put a gun into his hands, handed him a brown paper bag with a gun in it, and kind of pushed this that much further. If that man had never given him the gun, maybe he never would have become Joker. There's a lot of ifs, a lot of places where the story could have changed, but the reality is, like, all of these are believable situations. His reactions are not unrealistic, sadly. Like, there are many people in our society who struggle, and okay, I'm getting there. I'm sorry. Yeah, that discordant strife within him, wanting to and believing that he had long been told by the one who loved him, his mother, that he was on the earth to bring happiness, yet he couldn't feel it, and he tried to bring it to other people, and no one else mirrored it or confirmed those efforts, but rather quite the opposite. And so he ultimately unintentionally rose to fame as the initiator and driving force behind a political movement against the rich who oppressed the masses with their wealth. And the irony, again, from invisible to leader, the whole movie, its comedy type was irony. It's I didn't think it was as overly dark and daunting as I thought it was going to be, in all honesty. I thought it was more realistic and just like a kind of a depressing, like, oh, I see our society so much in this fictional story, and it makes me kind of, it's sad to look at. And to, I mean, I have students that I work with who portray some of the same characteristics and have some of the same problems this character had. And it's really heartbreaking to, and yet this man was also actually more functional in some ways than, in that, I mean, he had some really good skills. So, I mean, not all of his social skills were good, but he did have some social skills, and he did have some good coping mechanisms, and he was able to kind of support him, like, function in a home, and even support his mom some. But that was my really long review. Sorry. your turn.
Yeah, so there's a few political parts that I would change up. And so my part of I'm gonna talk more about the movie as the movie and as a Joker and as a DC film.
And you said the other, anyways, yeah.
But the political parts, it's very evident that the director, and as the director has talked about before, like has like this kind of woke culture. You can see that he is kind of rallying against by making it the main one of the main background like world that's happening. So the Joker, like you said, is going about things on a reaction basis, right? He's not planning anything. And when you watch the movie, you realize that there is no plot. There is no like goal for the Joker to reach. It is literally just following a guy and his reactions to things. And then people interpret it. So he killed a few guys being jerks, and people, since they were rich, people interpreted his actions as a way to get at rich people. And he was not planning that. And that's what makes this a great Joker movie, is that anarchy, that chaos, that he's not coming out with some grand plan or grand scheme. He is doing things just on a whim. But the crowds, they fell into this hole of, this must be what he meant, and so like, let's all rally. And in this case, they were supporting it, like they were supporting such a terrible thought that we should kill rich people, right? Like just because they don't agree with that they should be rich, or they think that they're the trouble of Gotham. And that whole, you can kind of take your own morals of what it's trying to say out of that. Like, just everybody blindly follows some guy that doesn't even know what he's doing. He's not trying to do anything. And the other part to it is, Joker, I think would still have become Joker, regardless of why, or regardless of the things that happened to him, like as a person, because he had problems, and some of it could be it could have spurred from his childhood, but the events in the movie were not what ended up making him become Joker, in my opinion, outside of one event, and that is the social worker and him losing his medicine. That, because the medicine, I believe, was probably helping him with his delusions, probably helping him with his violent tendencies, probably helping him with a lot of things. And as he lost that, and he lost his counseling support, he just gets unleashed. And so this was always the Joker. He was just being suppressed, which, it, in the best ways possible. And he, like, in a way that he was a good community, a good person of society, and you watch as he slowly devolves into madness. As not only does he lose that, but he goes through his own mental breaks without even that would break people without medicine, figuring out that you're adopted, figuring out your mother and your her boyfriend's abused you, like figuring out that like literally your life is a lie, and then also getting fired from your job at the same time, and you don't, and like having your money cut from you, and everything. Like these things individually, some of them could break a single person, let alone somebody that is already having mental problems. Now, this as a DC movie, really like it. Like it really is true to the Joker. The one thing I did not like is the fact that he had these problems. The movie itself is great. It did well for the movie, but my personal Joker, I like the idea that he didn't have these, like the Joker didn't have these problems. He didn't have a disturbed childhood. He didn't have.
You just want a psycho.
He is literally a psychopath that is just doing
for no reason.
Like because once you put a reason or you try creating a sympathy for what the Joker is doing,
it more realistic and
and for this movie it works, and we
disagree on this.
Yeah, in this movie it works, but as a Joker movie, or as a Batman like Joker,
I think like that.
I personally like the Joker that would not have had any of this. I didn't like, but they did do good still keeping his backstory ambiguous. Like he is not actually Arthur Fletch. They very much stuck to that idea of, the Joker is a like his past is a multiple choice. Which brings us to the theory section that people are constantly talking about, which is
not
whether
all good theory.
whether it was real or not. And there's a couple of things that even the director has said that might actually allude to it not being real. And my personal take, whether or not the director reveals in the future that it was all fake or whatever, my personal take was that it was real. The movie was very distinct when it told you what was real and what wasn't real. And so, and when it comes to the end scene where he was like thinking it all in his head, and then leaves with bloody footprints, meaning that like indicating that he killed the nurse or the counselor that he was just with, then he was already unhinged at that point. Right? If this was all a story that he made up in his head, first of all, he would have delusions within his own delusion, which doesn't make a lot of sense story-wise. Two, I think just having it all be in his head is a kind of a cheap cop-out of, making nothing real. And three, he wouldn't be unhinged in front of his nurse at that point. You would have to have these events for especially the losing the medicine part to be able to lead him to a point where he would kill his counselor, because he didn't kill his counselor in his delusion. If it was all in his head, like why would he kill his counselor if he never actually had that slow descent into madness that the movie was portraying? So that's why I don't think it was the real thing. But there was another theory that is not the Joker that Batman ends up fighting. And the age discrepancy between Bruce Wayne and the Joker, he would be like well into his 60s or 70s by the time.
So? I think the Joker character in this, they said he was only about 30. So Bruce's was like 10, so like when is Bruce Batman in another 20 years when he's 30?
30, 40.
That only makes Joker 50. That seems reasonable to me. That's a perfect timeline.
That a lot of people say that's pretty old, because Joker is gifted, like according to the comics, he was like actually pretty gifted with combat. Like, he was actually a pretty good fighter.
You can be 50 and be good at
yeah,
combat.
he could be, but this Joker especially is not training for it.
Not
right?
yet, but
And
now that he's rose into this... Sorry, go on.
anyways, like, there's, and even the director hinted that this person could be the guy that inspired the Joker. I kind of like the idea that this is the Joker that ends up fighting Batman, and he's less of, and because it doesn't have to follow the comics before like it did before. Again, like I said, this Joker has issues, like mental issues. My Joker, I prefer, would have mental issues, obviously, because he's the Joker, but not this kind of sad, like, life that kind of people would indicate might be the reason why he is that way. I like a Joker. I would, if it's going to be a comic book Joker more true, I'd say a Joker that is literally just a crazy person doing his own thing. But in this universe, this Joker, if he ended up fighting Batman, it would be cool to see, like, what they do. It wouldn't be a direct confrontation, I don't think. I think this Joker would, again, just kind of do his own thing. And the Batman would try stopping him, and he would thwart him, like, try to stop Batman, obviously, from being, just like he tried to stop the cops from taking him down for killing the subway people. But it was never like something that, it was never like an active thing. It's like he actively had a vendetta against Batman or Bruce Wayne or anything like that. I don't know. I think there's a lot of cool stories in that universe.
I think the layers of him having briefly thought that he was the son of Tom Wayne, and then the kind of maybe not jealousy, but the feelings he would have towards the young Bruce, and then also how Bruce is obviously very displeased with Joker because of not only the movement that ultimately killed his parents, but that Joker ends up being this man that is against everything that is Batman's ideas. I took some notes while you were talking because you know my memory, but I have more comments now.
You have more comments?
I have more comments.
Okay.
So
one sec.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
So I thoroughly love the movie. Again, there was a few things that, like, if it was my idealistic Joker, but outside of that, like, the art style was, again, fantastic. Like, there was, I think DC, this shows that DC can do something just as good as Marvel without creating a Marvel cinematic universe or a DC cinematic universe like they were doing with the Justice League, right? Like, they don't have to do that. They can commit to their own individual stories, because there are a lot of heroes and villains in the DC universe, and some of them can have more supernatural elements than the others, but they can come up with great stories even if they are one-off stories. And that is essentially what this is supposed to be, is a one-off story. I don't expect a lot coming out of this in the future. Like, DC and Warner Brothers probably want to, but I know the director said that he wasn't very interested in it unless something really good he thinks of. And I kind of agree that, like, I don't think much would do justice to this universe as it is, if they try to expand upon it. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't do other similar vein stories. Maybe some of them are more light, some of them are even darker, some of them are more supernatural, but you could have these messages and you can have this very powerful story without creating a whole Marvel universe to get 20 movies just for an endgame.
My turn.
She has some closing thoughts.
I do. So I think it's interesting when you were speaking, so these might seem a little, but so what you were saying about how the crowd of Joker mask wearing folks, how they kind of interpret what they want the actions of others. I mean, I think all people do, to some degree, we do interpret the world differently. We interpret from others what we want, or what we do just interpret for whatever other reason. And yeah, the counselor, I mean, she was someone to talk to, and having that go away, that was, I mean, just someone for him to have had to listen to. But ultimately, I think, although you want a Joker that is just violent and psychotic for the just no real reason.
I don't want sympathy behind the Joker. I don't want...
See, that is, to me, that is what is more dangerous to society. People consuming that kind of thing and having that perpetuated and seeing and consuming that kind of content, that's more detrimental to society. Whereas this, like, no, we don't want people to have those strong reactions. We don't want violence. Like, we need to do everything we can to give people the tools that they need, to give them the support they need to be understanding of others. Yeah. But I'm
not talking about what's good for society in general. I'm just talking about what you Joker,
think makes a good story.
Yeah, what I think would make a good Joker.
Because you think it's more mysterious or something.
Not that it's more mysterious. That that.
Why
that
is it
his,
better? Then why do you think
his
it's better?
actions, you can't deduce why he's doing the things that he's doing. You can't deduce why he is the person that he is.
So you want the mystery.
Not that he's the mystery.
But that's exactly what you're saying, that you don't know the why. The not knowing is the mystery.
It's not the mystery that I'm intrigued by. It's that the fact that there is no, like, it's not that the mystery is solved already.
So you're saying that you just want someone with such a strong chemical imbalance in their brain that it's just, it's off the charts.
He is chaos,
irrational.
Embodiment. Yeah, just like...
Yeah, but he's not chaos. He's a Joker. He's like mischief and mayhem, but not violence.
No, he is violent.
Okay, yes, he is violent.
DC comics, like, he is violence. He is chaos, the embodiment of chaos. And what makes him so great is that he has no reason for it. He was not like that's what makes him like such a great villain, is that he... That's not to say that this wasn't a great interpretation of Joker. This was also and he is great for all the things that he did.
I hate that kind of perpetuation. Again, I don't believe in censorship, but that kind of perpetuation of like, oh, it's okay that there are people. It's okay that we can't explain this. No. I want to understand everything. And I know this is part of like my personality, is like I am a little obsessive about, I want to know and understand everything. Yeah. But yeah, no, we can't have people in society that we literally don't understand. We need to figure it out. So no.
Well, yeah, but you're
That's a bad Joker. That's a bad story.
That's a very good Joker. Like, if you found out that Joker didn't have a bad father, wasn't abused, he was this way without any of these warning signs that we traditionally link to this kind of break, right? Like, that's a great story, like that, and that is a greater that's something that you want to look in, like you would want to look into. Like, all right, let's say
if it's a story, the story is finite, and I'm not into like theorizing like behind, because no, it's just
it gave you the answers that you wanted to see, though, right? Like, as to why the Joker would be the Joker. But if it was a movie that showed that the Joker had a happy family, had a happy life, had like there was nothing.
So then you're saying that just like a severe neurological and chemical imbalance in his brain would be the explanation.
There's obviously
that he has
something...
like oppositional defiant plus like violent, extreme violence, some kind of but see, no.
That makes it great.
No,
like, that makes him such a great villain.
Behavior is communication, and him doing violent acts is a form of communication. What is he communicating? Well,
that's the thing. He's not trying to communicate anything. He doesn't believe anything. He is just doing things, right? He says in like the Dark Knight movie, I am just a dog chasing cars. I don't know what I would do with it.
Dogs chase cars for reasons. There are literally reasons why dogs chase cars.
Yeah, but
Behavior
he doesn't
is
know what, like,
spurred
the
by
quote,
something.
literally the quote is,
I
I
don't care
don't
what the
even
quote
know
is.
what I would do with one
Yeah,
if
some
I
peop-
caught it.
It's lack of self-awareness. What he needs then is counseling, and he needs to improve his self-awareness. He needs to be doing exercises,
I
meditation,
think he's
grounding.
actually
He
very
needs-
aware. I think he, like,
But
especially
if he
this-
doesn't know why he's doing the things, then no, he's not self-aware. He's the opposite of self-aware.
I think he's aware enough of himself to not care.
I don't want what you want in this Joker kind of character. But back to my additional comments. Oh yeah, so Joker got his dream. You said about how like the movie really had no like plot line, which I kind of agree to. If there was a plot like goal, it was his ambition, his goal was to kind of be on the Murray Franklin show. And he did. Ultimately, he achieved that goal. He got to that in the end. But again, that kind of discordant irony, it was the opposite of what he had envisioned. And
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, speaking of the irony and the comedy and like the whole plot point, there's a rhetoric that you hear throughout the movie. You know, I thought my life was a tragedy, now I think it's comedy, and that was and I personally thought, like, instantly jumps to that Shakespearean thought process of, you have essentially two forms of entertainment. You have the comedy and you have a tragedy. Tragedy being things like Hamlet, which, you know, everything started off well and then ended horribly for the main character. And a comedy is when things start off horribly and end up well for the main character. And so in that ideology, this movie actually does fit into the comedy category.
No, it doesn't. I disagree on this. For him, for his perspective.
That's the main character.
But the society as a whole, the whole movie, the world that is built within this movie, the overall trajectory was tragedy.
But that's not the main character.
The main character's perspective for him,
and that's
his perspective, his very narrow-minded perspective.
Yeah.
Sure.
But that's
He thinks that he finally is like understood, but really, no, it's still a tragedy.
Same thing happens in Hamlet. Like, after everybody in that place is dead, the world is actually better off for it, right? Like in Hamlet, everybody, like, the world is better off that everybody in that castle is dead.
I thought it was interesting too that, so when I was, before we got off on this tangent about the comedy tragedy thing said, I was saying about how like his dream to get to the Murray show, and then he got there, but then it was the opposite of what he'd originally envisioned. Like, it was literally the opposite of, like, instead of being there with his hero and it being this grand thing. And like when he was after he'd gotten the call that he was going to be on the show, he was still in that kind of conflicted status of like putting the gun to his own head and envisioning him killing himself as a joke on the stage. But then again, the opposite even of that opposite was that he didn't kill himself on the stage. He killed the man that had been his idol. And it kind of almost shifted the power back to him in that, like, that was the man that gave him the epithet Joker, right? Not that that was really like a powerful thing, but this is the one man that Joker had looked up to, and now he's kind of like taking whatever in his mind that he had cast to that idol, and now he threw that idol off his pedestal. He killed his idol, and he is Joker. He embraced that role. And the ending, my closing here, what I get from this movie, my takeaway, is that this character, like, he had some strengths, and like, no, he wasn't all violent. And yeah, this movie it's a tragedy, and he needed stronger coping mechanisms. Really, he needed more support. He needed more in his toolbox to help him not be Joker. He needed something different to keep him as Arthur and to help him to be a better Arthur and not go the route of Joker. But our takeaway is that there are going to always be problems, that things aren't always going to be perfect, but every little thing can just be like one more thread that's breaking to kind of to rip the rope kind of thing. And so when we interact with other people in our day-to-day, and when we make choices, we need to be more conscientious of, we don't know what other people are going through. We don't know what they've been through. There's no way, even if they tried to explain, like, we still wouldn't fully understand it. So always approach other people, and always like try your best, and be compassionate, be empathetic, please. Like,
The last thing I'd say is for any DC fan, there's a lot of parts of the movie that are nice nods to people that do like Joker, or like the DC Batman, and the different things. Like, for instance, him killing the host of the show, like, was a very much a Joker thing that has happened in the comic series, where the Joker gassed an entire audience before. And there's lots of nods and lots of Easter eggs along the way of general DC fans. And I think anybody that is a fan of DC is old enough to watch this movie and likes this kind of movie.
Wait, clarify, because you weren't saying that anyone who likes DC is old enough to watch this movie.
Yeah.
You said that likes DC and is old enough could watch this.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
I mean, if you're not a fan of DC, if you're not a fan of DC, but you are interested, like, you still would like this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just saying the old enough in general.
You don't have to be a DC fan.
Yeah, you don't have to be a DC fan to enjoy the movie. But for those DC fans, there are things in there for you as well.
On that note,
that was Tech Talks this week. Have a great one, and we will see you next week.
Be nice to one another, please. Oh, that's that one thing.